Kia ora. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Newman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm just trying to process the speech, and I have great respect for Councillor Henderson. It's been an interesting day. I'm surprised that God got damned twice, actually, but I've been reflecting on the discussions that we've had. And look, this is an unusual process because it has been a process dictated by a minister. And, you know, when a minister sends you a letter that says this is what Cabinet intends to do now, you do have to respond to that. And reflecting on this, there's a saying, for I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Now, that's a declaration from the Lord to the exiles. It's not a statement from either Chris Bishop or Chris Luxon, although sometimes you could be mistaken. I'm reflecting from the book of Jeremiah. And that was verse 11. Now, at verses 12 and 13, I kid you not, this is what it says. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me, and when you seek me with all your heart. Now, I honestly feel like we have not so much an elected government at the moment, but a self-appointed deity that is presenting to us these edicts as to how Auckland is to respond to this nonsensical bullshit that is the planning reforms that seem to change with the tides. And so I don't agree with your damnation of the Lord, Mr. Chair, but I do agree with, I understand your frustration. And I've got Hayden laughing behind me. So I absolutely have been one of the people that has been lobbying ministers to dial back from 2 million. I'm very comfortable to say that because, I mean, I'm not hiding the fact, but the reality is that 2 million has a consequence, and it's a negative consequence. And I think a lot of Aucklanders share the concern about that number. The issue is how we respond to it, and I want to thank the majority of colleagues for, I think, a pretty reasonable approach to the changing discussion, the principles of how this will all fit together. But there is no doubt that in particular the outer suburbs of Auckland that are are comparatively poorly served by the public transport infrastructure should not be the recipients of the intensification. There are others that should come first. And so I generally commend the approach that has been taken, and I hope that the government will take heed of these recommendations today. Thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor, and apologies for saying goddamn. I apologise for the blasphemy I used earlier in my speech. No, genuinely sorry about that. Councillor Sayers.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Just a few quick words. I guess one is it's just so sad when we've got the unitary plan, which has a ample capacity to meet the future needs, that we had to go down this track. A track that we haven't been able to control. But I think going forward, the most important thing that I'll be concentrating on, and I just want to send this message to my colleagues, is that every time central government's tried some sort of housing intensification intervention, particularly with Auckland, it has failed to identify the infrastructure that you've got to have to support that housing. Whether it's an SHA process or any other process, that has failed every time. We've got to really step up to the mark here and really push hard to get them to truly understand the importance of having that infrastructure in place before or an exact timing as that housing goes in. Otherwise, we're going to end up with quite a shambles. And that's my greatest concern now moving forward, that we've got to this point with the principles. I think there's room in the scope of what we've voted through today to ensure that the infrastructure, that the government is educated by us to an extent where they do not fail to help put in the infrastructure in time for the housing. Thanks.
Kia ora, Councillor, thank you. Councillor Winiata.
Yes, thank you. I guess with my inexperience at the governing body, I have some experience in property and a few questions around the process. One is, I guess there's some frustration around the table about the dictation on how the Auckland Council is going to make its decisions based on a minister in Wellington who grew up in Lower Hutt. The issues that I have are based around infrastructure, and there was a point made earlier around high capacity dictates what we spend on infrastructure. However, without a spatial plan, it's very hard to dictate where that capacity is going to come in. If we're looking at X number of houses in the future, there doesn't seem to be a plan, and certainly haven't had anything presented over where we're going to be getting water from in the future. The flip side of that, where the water's going to be going to, what Watercare can resource and their capacity to dispose of. We'll have stormwater infrastructure to deal with, not to mention the unanticipated growth and any issues that come up through other plan changes. But I would insist everyone err on the side of caution when they start talking about the market and the what affordable housing is. When we talk about people, if they're purchasing property today, what we're essentially saying to them is that there's going to be mechanisms in the future which are going to drive their property prices down, and you're going to have mortgages on property that are more than the value of the house. So we've seen that happen in England years ago, and that results in a market crash. The strength of the market revolves around the strength of the economy and good lending rates. I myself have first-hand knowledge of what happens when an economy crashes post-COVID, when money was almost free. Everyone was in on it. We were seeing properties in very downtrodden areas of Manarewa selling for more than other areas in the gardens. $2 million just for 1,000 square metres of the price of land, as opposed to a lifestyle property in and around the gardens and other areas. So we have to tread very carefully around how we're talking about the price of property, the future markets, because I'm also a little concerned that some discussions around looking at intensification along main rail lines, essentially what we're saying, rather than this being confidential, is we're highlighting to developers, here are the areas of high intensification where property values are going to increase. It makes it very it's very attractive to those that own homes, but anyone that is really got their head screwed on properly is going to be looking at those 5 train station areas, those walkable catchments, and starting to plan very carefully and cautiously around where they go. Not all properties are going to be able to deal with that intensification, especially in areas within that 10-kilometre catchment. But Manarewa has had a really hard time with intensification. Not only is it dealing with intensification within the water area, but also around it. Papakura, Takanini and Papakura grew 25% from the previous census, which certainly wasn't planned for, and we're dealing with a whole lot of traffic and intensification issues and infrastructure issues that nobody had planned for, and yet we're required to just push a button, provide some maps, and away we go and deal with it. So the decisions that we make here, we may be able to work these through at workshops and provide amendments and structure things as we go, but in my experience, when someone is given free rein and an agenda, everything goes out the window. So we need to step forward very carefully with the decisions that we're making today around the amendments, just to ensure that government or whoever is in Wellington don't take the mickey and we lose control of everything. Thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor, thank you. Councillor Williamson.
Yeah, look, I want to get a few things clear from my point of view. I think we need intensification, and I think we need to make capacity available so that a whole lot more properties can actually be made available for people. But there's a few things that I want to put on that. The first one is we get all of this argument about what happened in COVID and the massive sort of spike we got in house prices. Most of that was not to do with lack of availability. Most of that was a big chunk of New Zealanders all pouring home in one big batch trying to find, and with most of them well-heeled money-wise, driving prices. So we've got to be very careful to make what I think is housing policy based on a pandemic, which had unbelievable implications for everybody. The second thing is that there is really good examples elsewhere of where cities have used intensification properly, and I was Consul General in Los Angeles and flew into a lot of American cities, and the one thing that got to me was when I looked out the window, I could often see a vein of quite high-rise buildings, just a single vein, and I thought, there's no motorway, why is that? Got a map, turned out there was the underground railway line running along it, you were building along the railway line. Makes real sense, big fan, sign me up. Same with bus corridors like Eastern Busway when it's finished, same with Pakuranga Highway, 3 lanes either way, same with town centres. What I never understood was what the 2 million, or where it came from. And what it did is it forced bleeding of this orange stuff right down onto the coastal leafy streets of people whose properties were worth quite a lot of money, when it was not needed. I hear from a lot of people saying, well, you're never going to use 2 million, so it didn't matter. But I'll tell you why it mattered. It meant that a developer might come into your street, build one heap of junk, no car park, 17 units, cars parked all up and down the street, devalue the value of all of the other properties in that street, and then guarantee the government, whoever it be of the day, would come in and say, oh, we're changing that, and you're stuck with that one thing. So how about we have good common sense policies to start with that don't drive the intensification into areas where it's not needed, but where we follow what is a pretty good practice elsewhere in the world, and that is to go around town centres, to go down corridors, to go around transport hubs, where I am a big fan, and a lot of my electorate will have it. Pakuranga Highway, sound me in. All around the Pakuranga town centre, even go higher than is allowed. Makes sense. People live, work and play within there. Public transport is their main form of going to and from it, as opposed to what we've got now. But I can take you now to examples of pieces of rubbish that have been built in a street that have driven the value of those houses around them down dramatically, don't have a single car park in them, and there's cars parked up and down the road and on berms and over driveways and so on. And all I get from people is, why are you doing this when it's not necessary? And that's why I did all my mathematical calculations and sat looking at the maps and got to the 1.5, where we can get everything we want. Remember, there is just under, it's fractionally under 3 people per dwelling in Auckland. It's 2.874, last number I got from census. In other words, go with 3. If we're going to allow 2 million dwellings, we're allowing for 6 million more people. More. Now, more people, yeah, more. That's more than the whole population of the country. So I don't know what it is you've been smoking, but if you think we should have 6 million more people in the city, you're wrong. And I think the government have a huge amount to answer for it. I'm not going to be as nice to them as Richard was. I think the government have messed us around and pissed me off beyond belief for no reason again at all. And I just do not understand why they've stood the ground and Bishop saying, you know, we'll do this to you if you don't listen. We could get everything Auckland wanted. We could actually take away the pressure of not enough properties being available without doing the damage. And therefore, I'm delighted we're going to stick at a 1.6, allow further intensification in the city, and actually get some common sense stuff out of it, and that we don't end up doing some of the ridiculous damage we've done to properties across this country. And by the way, here's a dilemma for you. I'll leave you with it. Christopher Bishop regularly says in the House, I want to drive house prices down. I've got the video clips, I'll play them to you if you don't believe me. And his Prime Minister says, I don't want to see house prices go down. I just want to see wages grow faster than house prices. And Chris Hipkins asked him in the House, which is right? And Luxon gave a word-salad answer, which was neither a yes or a no, because I can't tell. So you can't want to drive house prices down when you're a minister, but not to drive them down when you're the Prime Minister. So it's a shambles from Wellington. We should actually be bloody telling them to get their act together as well. But in fact, frankly, I'm a big fan of intensification, but it's got to be in the right place.
Kia ora. Thank you, Councillor. We have 2 more speakers. Deputy Mayor first.
Oh, Chair, look, it's an interesting day, isn't it, when a former minister of a government speaks against the government and a centre-left chair speaks in favour of the government and quoted the Bible, quoted the... You know, I'm really getting very confused. But look, I just want to take us in all seriousness back to what we're doing here. And basically, the government have asked us to put together how we are going to reduce the number from 2 million down to 1.6. We've covered the principles, which started off as 4, and they've been expanded quite significantly. But the essence is we will be agreeing to intensify our city along major transport corridors, the CRL stations, where there is infrastructure in the city centre. And I don't think actually anyone in Auckland will disagree with that. You know, the number is slightly reduced. I know there are people around this table would love the number to stay at higher, but actually at the end of the day, 1.6 is still high, isn't it? It's still going to be way above what it will end up by having anyway. So I think we've come to a good place. I'm happy to support the recommendations you've put together, and I know that you've worked really hard to actually get us to this place. I'm not a great fan of C4, I've said that before, and I voted in support of Councillor Fletcher and Councillor Gillen on that. But I think, as I said, I think we've ended up in a good place. I want to thank you for your work. I know it's been significant behind the scenes, and I think actually at the end of the day, the reality is no one will ever have 1.6 million dwellings more than what we've got. It's just a plan that we have to deliver as per government direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And point of order, I wasn't saying I wasn't mean to the government. I just was trying to be constructive as a... Yeah. Last speaker, Mayor Brown.
Okay, thanks very much. Long, terrible day. People seem to have forgotten, and no, start off by saying, nobody is keener in getting the government out of Auckland's affair than I am. And to hear somebody say I didn't push back must have been deaf. I don't think the government has any right to interfere, and particularly when they're living in a failing city that can't clean its lavatory paper off the coast. I don't want any input from the government at all. All of this today, it came because previous government, in conjunction with the current one, came up with medium density residential rules, which meant that every section in Auckland could have three-storey houses on it, and that's where the big number came from. And all those nice old people who came in there from Huon Bay and where I live, worrying about their thing, don't seem to understand that the current rules allowed three-storey buildings right next door, whether you liked it or not, so that they could look into your pool and look over the fence and all that other stuff. That was there. So we are correcting a time when the government stuck their oar into Auckland. Don't forget that. Don't say it's driven by us or anything. It came because they all decided that we could have three-storey buildings on every bloody section, including right up in Rodney out in the countryside. And that came, it was when Labour and National got together, which is something that I'm not quite sure is a good idea, but anyhow, so we are correcting a government interference. So this guy is interfering, but he's trying to uninterfere from something that was even worse. The result is that if we vote sensibly now, we will have a capacity of 1.6, which is less than 2 million, and I agree with that. We already had 900,000, which was less than what was needed anyhow. But we're going to put it in sensible places. And so if you happen to have decided to live on a main road with lots of buses on it or near a railway station, you would have already known that people are going to be attracted to that area. And the idea that somebody doing this reduces the value is not actually true, actually, because within 500 metres of where I live, and there are already several six-storey buildings, on which I live on top of one, there are 3 more going up that I can see. And so, and it's not a cheap area. And so the value is because, but what it does is it gets more people into a high value area, and that's a good thing. So that one block of land now has 10 families on it instead of 1. This is a sensible result in correcting an already insane interference from the government. And Ken Turner, if you stay on the council, you'll be talking about planning for the next 20 years because that's what councillors talk about. You'll be talking about roads and transport for 20 years because that's what councillors talk about. If you want to talk about art galleries and shooting deer, go somewhere else. That's not...
Art galleries?
Well, a bit. Shooting deer or mining gold, you'll have to go somewhere else.
Dear.
I don't have to talk about it because they're knee-deep wanting to talk about art galleries around me. But that's what councillors do, and this is going to come up with
And
something.
fix potholes, that's for sure.
Peter? Well, not in your area at this stage, but wait until we actually get some control over AT. Just watch. Okay, not to get into that, but I will be definitely supporting this because it is better than what we had. It's not the best in the world, but if you don't support this, you're going to be supporting medium density reserve. And those of you who vote for supporting medium density reserve, I'm going to come and build a 3-storey house over your fence. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. Councillor Ferry.
Oh, kia ora. Just to start on a lighter note, I noticed that Councillor Turner mentioned McGillicuddy Serious, and I would just caution you against supporting them because their policies included demolition of all buildings on a last up, first down basis, a school leaving age of 65, and I quite like this one, vote only for those under 18. So be careful what you vote for there. I wanted to just point out that what we're doing here is voting on principles which I think largely reflect what we were trying to do with 2 million, but we're pulling it in and acknowledging the change to 1.6, right? So there's actually the principles at the heart of this actually reflect the compact city model, actually reflect putting intensification where there is infrastructure, where there is access to jobs and education and services and transport routes, all of that stuff. It's just that previously with 2 million, we had to do the stuff that was the high-hanging fruit, if you like. And now we can leave the high-hanging fruit there on the tree and focus more on the low-hanging ones, to extend my metaphor. I'm not sure what McGillicuddy Serious's policy was about stripping fruit off trees. And while I think we're going to have some really interesting conversations in the workshops about what was reflected in Table 2 from the staff, about those optional bits that we could go more in this direction or less in that direction to still get to our 1.6 with a buffer within these principles. What I didn't hear today, even in the debate about the amendment, which I think we can all agree was quite heated, was actually much disagreement with these principles, other than C4. The amendment didn't seek any changes to them beyond removing C4 and adding in minimal for the buffer. So I actually feel like, even though we've had this heated debate, most people are okay with these principles. So I'll be interested to see in how the vote rocks out. We've had a lot of discussion about process concerns, but actually that's central government stuff that we have given our input on. Some change, some not change, and it's actually not what we're voting on today. I think also what we sometimes lose in these debates about housing is renters. And I'm really conscious, I don't think we have any renters around the table now. And so I would just like people to remember that as we move into the workshops, 40% plus, an increasing proportion of our population are renting and not owning homes, and owning a home is becoming less and less something that young people in particular, feel that they can do in this city. For good or ill, that's the direction of travel, and we do need to have that in the back of our minds, I think, as we continue, because we talk a lot about people's property value and their property rights, and I've said this before, you don't have any property rights if you don't own property. And actually, we have a responsibility to create a city that houses everyone safely and fairly. And I believe at the lowest possible carbon emissions, which I support here as well. So I just wanted to point that out. And in closing, what we've been hearing from developers around, and I acknowledge we've got sites sitting close to train stations and stuff like that that aren't being developed. And what we're hearing from developers is that they're not taking those opportunities up for two reasons. One is uncertainty, and we can control that to a certain extent, and we can progress this responsibly in line with principles and address that uncertainty. We can't help with the economy side, which sits much more with central government, but we can make steps forward on certainty. I hope you will support these principles today so that we can move forward with certainty. Thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor, thank you. And I'll just give my right of reply, so just making sure there was no one else. Oh, okay, Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair. I guess there's no silver bullet, really, is there? When we're thinking about the physical infrastructure, the social infrastructure that we want, whether it's any of these things, this isn't necessarily going to fix affordability. It's not going to fix a lot of things that we like to try and present. I just want to make a personal observation. As the person who actually got the whole rail corridor issue kick-started so many, many years ago, it was always intended that we had intensification. But the assumption behind that was that we would manage it carefully, that we would ensure that there was the right infrastructure that was in place, and that we would stand up to bad legislation from time to time. We've had a whole lot of bad stuff from both the Labour Party and the National Party. And I think we've lurched from extreme to extreme. So I just hope that we can exercise collectively some leadership in a respectful way that will actually stand up to this fluctuating pendulum that is going from side to side. We do owe it to Aucklanders to try and fix this. It's been a hell of a long time, and it's just not acceptable. So I hope that we're not so kowtowed, in terms of the face of government ministers, and the government made us do this. Well, sometimes we can stand up to government. And on this particular matter, I think the reputation of governments, both blue and red, is not good. So I'm picking that this is not the end of it, sadly. I think the idea of having some principles is great. Why we couldn't have had that a few years ago, that would have been quite helpful. But it's not going to miraculously somehow just fix affordability. It's not going to fix all of these other things. It's going to be a long, slow process. And I hope that the Mayor can represent this council to the government fairly. I hope that as Chair, and I have confidence in Phil Wilson as our CEO, that he will be speaking to his counterparts within MFE and local government and all of those advisors to actually try and get some little common sense into this situation, because it's been ugly, it's been unfair, and it's pitted young against old. It's pitted areas, the south against the north and the central against. It's not been good for Auckland. So hopefully we can now see a bit of progress in moving forward, but it's going to require all of us to be courageous at times and stand up for what we believe and not just be intimidated. So I appreciate the way that you have chaired it today, and I appreciate everyone's contribution. I particularly want to acknowledge John Gillen for wanting to stand for those matters that are important for him. And I'd like to thank the Auckland Council staff who put out their hand to me yesterday, to Rebecca Purvis in particular. Thank you very much for helping us draft something that would generate some of the debate that we needed to have. It didn't land where I wanted it to land, but at least we've aired some of the issues, and I hope that government is listening. Thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor, thank you. Councillor Bartley.
Oh, thank you. Just to acknowledge you, Chair, and your Deputy Chair, Councillor Ferry, for the work, and the officers, Megan and John Durgood, and Phil Reid for the commitment they've shown in doing this work, not just now, but even last year. So thank you very much for doing that for us. I'll support this. I've benefited from intensification in my area because I've been able to buy a townhouse last year for me and my dog. Was it last year or the year before? No chance in hell that I would have been able to afford a house on my own if I wasn't a councillor, but also if there was no intensification in building these houses in the community. So there are benefits. I hope that this will enable more housing and give other people a chance to buy a home and see that as an option because they love Auckland. They don't want to move to Australia, but they are because they don't see themselves being able to provide a life for them and their families in our city, which we all represent. I also look at my town centres and they are really struggling. So many closed shops, and I'm really hoping that with more intensification near the train stations and our town centres, that we can help revitalise them with more people living there and hopefully shopping there. And perhaps my contribution before was a little bit disempowered, saying we're like going real passionate over just providing principles, but actually I can see that we've had influence on government, and I hope that these principles will provide further influence to the cabinet decision makers. And I won't quote anything from the Bible, but I will quote 50 Cent. Behind me is infinite power, before me is endless possibility, around me is boundless opportunity. So I hope we can provide that for our next generations with this.
Kia ora, Councillor.
Can I just ask, was Jeremiah Labour or National?
I'm not sure. I'm sure I grew up under the Church of 50 Cent, so I guess we have to focus on what that is. Just briefly to close, I guess, to the young and old suggestion, I think there are obviously more opportunities with intensification for young people to buy in. I know many of the people I know who are happening to buy into places like Northcote are able to buy homes for 600,000-700,000. But also, this morning I was at an urban room event around this subject, and there was a developer there who said that he's building terrace homes and apartments in city fringe suburbs, and the majority of people who are buying those apartments are over 70, moving out of family homes, freeing up those homes for families. So it's quite an interesting juxtaposition. I know on the North Shore too, there's a lot of older people moving into terrace housing and apartments, so they can stay in the community that they've maybe brought up their families. Yeah. The other thing is that 40-something% of Auckland are people living alone or people living without kids. So we just need to also acknowledge that there's different typologies that people may want to live in at different parts of their lives. To clarify again, I wasn't saying that I didn't want to be mean to the government. I guess my way forward has been to not be out there criticising things, because I think we have got wins. If you think of the MDRS, you think of hazards, we think of now the flexibility. I guess just at some point we have to make a decision to move forward, and I believe this is it. The big work will be in those workshops where options will come to us, and the reason why I put the clause about the MHU is to make it clear that most, if not nearly all, suburbs will have reductions in density again, much like happened through the change from 78 to 120. But as many people have said, I guess the staff put that forward just as a guide to make sure we focus on removing the FAB zones from the places that there isn't good infrastructure. All of that will still be up to us, what we put forward, once we know what the legislation is. And I do appreciate the conversations we've all had here today, and they're going to continue. We'll bring our local board chairs in, mana whenua and community as much as we can, but the timeframes, I assume, will be quick. So thank you all for today, and we will move to vote on this All those in favour? Are there any opposed?
Please record my vote against B4 and B7, please. B7.
Sorry, if we just want to scroll up to, okay, that would be, yeah, B4, B7. If you just want to check with the staff afterwards to make sure we've got the right things, thank you.
And sorry, again,
And I
C,
will
it's actually
add-
C4 and C8 for me.
C4 and C8. This way, yeah, if everyone can just come and check with Sandra afterwards to make sure we've recorded it accurately. Cool, thank you. And Councillor
And I'll ensure that Sandra has correctly recorded.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, so that's passed. Right, we'll move quickly to the other agenda items, I assume. So the work program, I'm happy to move. Councillor Ferry, Deputy Chair, would like to second. Oh, sorry, Councillor Philippine would like to second. Are there any questions on this? If there are, and you want to take them offline, you can as well. Right, all those in favour? Next point of the agenda. Sorry, I'm just trying to find my place. Councillor Philippina, I'll second status updates and actions and decisions. All those in, no, that's, yeah. All those in favour? 8.8, Councillor Short will move. Councillor Turner second. A summary of information. All those in favour? Closing karakia, unuhia, unuhia, unuhia. Kia ora tapanui, kia wātea, kia mama, tēnākau, te tinana. Me te wairoa, e tara takutu koia rā I rongo. Whakaria ake ke runga kia tina. Humie, huie, tai kie. Thank you to Councillor Baker and Councillor Foley for staying online for that time as well. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thanks, Chair.